if you want to look for an example of a Catholic gentleman, you should go no further than Cody Groeber. He is everything that you would want to see in a Catholic gentleman. And he was raised in Anderson, South Carolina. He attended St. Joseph Catholic School and attended St. Joseph Parish there in Anderson. And he went on to get a bachelor's in history degree from Furman University. Afterwards, he discerned the priesthood. And in that process, he volunteered for the diocese at Bishop England High School and for the College of Charleston campus ministry. But that discernment took him to Notre Dame for law school, where he met his beautiful wife here. And on May 27th of this month, just a couple of week and a half, or 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks from now, they will be celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary. Wow. They have 6 children: Sean, James, Annalisa, Finbar, Hugo, and Rosie.
Good job.
Wow.
Right. Well, no, good job for you guys.
And tell us about Finbar.
So Cody worked for as a public defender in his legal career up until recently. He spent 6 years as a public defender for Charleston County. He spent 2 years as a public defender for Berkeley County and 10 years as a federal public defender.
And all of them were great years having him as a PD. I can vouch for him from experience. Not because I was a defender.
Good clarification.
Yeah.
Now he is a shareholder with Saxton and Stump. And he specializes in complex corporate legal issues. He also concentrates on Title I issues and generally stands as a bulwark against government overreach. He's president of the board of directors for St. Joan of Arc Hybrid Catholic School, and also president of the board of directors for the Northbridge Pool Association. So, if you want to know a Catholic gentleman, look for Cody Groeber. Let's welcome him.
Can I just sit down? That doesn't really get any better than that. I didn't, preparing for this was very difficult for me, if I'm honest. And I think part of it for me is that I'm so impressed with a lot of the prior speakers, with their honesty, their openness about their own sort of personal conversions or personal, I think, charisms and journeys. And I don't, I watched, who spoke last? Bobby's speech last month. Man, what a great story. And I feel like I'm sort of not worthy to share kind of a stage with some of these people that have shared with us. And so it's hard for me to think about what I talk about. And what I really want, I kind of reflected on this all week, and that's, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of radical openness. And I'll tell you a little bit about me and kind of how I got to where I am, and how being radically open at different parts of my life has really borne fruit that was unexpected and that was joyful, brought real joy to my life. I grew up in I noticed Frank's, like the blurb is like becoming Catholic, and I was like, Frank knows about a convert, right? And I suppose all of us have maybe some type of conversion or reversion story where we really kind of made that true commitment to living according to God's will in our lives. So I'll talk about that a little bit, but as I thought about that, becoming Catholic, it's like I'm trying to become Catholic. I've always been Catholic, but I'm trying to get there. I'm still struggling to get there. And I'm still fighting to become Catholic, to become the best Catholic possible. And I think for me, sort of reflecting on this, I do think in the age that we live in, being radically open to God's will is radical. It is inconceivable to the general world around us, right? To the people who are not faithful. And in fact, it's anathema to a lot of sort of mainstream culture. That having this conception of being everything that we get is a gift from God, every single piece, every gift, every child, every person, every interaction we have with another person, right? That's a soul, an individual created by God. That your job, right, in that moment is to recognize that. And so I want to talk a little bit at the end about how I think we need to approach people in the business world, people that we come across in our interactions. And I will propose to you that we need to be radically open to that soul, and to listen to them, to learn from them, and to also be radically open about who we are, what we believe, and who we believe in. I grew up in Anderson, South Carolina. And went to St. Joseph's Parish my whole life there. Through 5th grade, I was in the school there, the Catholic school. Went to public school for high school. And I became what I kind of think of as an accidental apologist. The upstate's a little less Catholic, and a little more Protestant, a lot more Protestant. I frequently was asked, why do you worship Mary? My girlfriend, my senior year, was Baptist, and at her senior send off at her church, the very old pastor got up and started talking about all the cults that the seniors needed to be worried about when they went to college. So he went through a couple and said Catholicism. So that was the culture I grew up in. It's just a lot of questions and kind of challenges. And so I ended up, again, through accident, having to answer a lot of questions. And so I learned apologetics, not through any kind of super great study or an online course. This was pre-online courses. But just trying to answer questions, trying to figure out some answers. When I went to Furman for undergrad, and I did not, I had a great experience there, but I think that my faith was sort of rote at that time, and it was intellectual. It was, an ascent of sort of the intellect, but not more than that. I was at a retreat with the Catholic group one time, up at a camp that I ended up working at a few summers, and I was just sort of struggling with what is everything about in life. And I was with a friend, and we were just talking and looking down at the fire as it burned away in the night, and all of a sudden I saw the face of Christ in the ashes of the fire. Now, I am not a very pious person, okay? I never have been, never probably will be. I'm trying to become more pious. So this was not like something on my radar that I was expecting or asked for or anything like that. I probably was, I don't know that I really believed in miracles at that point. And so you think I'm not crazy. The other person I was there also saw this image, and it was very quick and fleeting, and who knows, could have been complete imagination. But I felt in that moment just complete grace, like a complete gift of the love of Christ. And I think it was not until that I started to sort of move away from a strictly intellectual understanding of the faith to a relational aspect of faith, relationship with Christ. I've heard a lot about that as somebody who grew up with Protestants around them a lot, right? Accepting Jesus into your heart, and pronouncing him as your Lord and Savior, and you'll be saved. There was almost a reaction for me against that, because it was so prevalent from the evangelical world and Protestant friends that I had, that, I wasn't really into this emotional, reactive relationship. That moment changed that for me, and I think it really kind of lit me on fire for listening to what was God's will in my life. Being the nerd that I am, I started something called the Dead Theologians Society, which is basic, I think I watched the Dead Poets Society, and it's like, oh, I'll just do this, except we'll talk about, the early church fathers. So a few of us read a bunch of the early church fathers, and again, I think it just funneled my intellect more as well. But I also started to realize, any question that is out there in human experience, any intellectual challenge, there's an answer. The church has an answer, or if it doesn't have the answer, right, that we seek or that we want, it's at least struggled with it. And, and I say that as recognize when I say the church, it's Catholic philosophers or theologians that aren't necessarily priests. At the same time, some really brilliant people were religious. Kepler, extremely religious. Mendel, who discovered modern genetics, religious. And I got to a point where I recognized that there's this huge intellectual tradition that can speak to any challenges or questions that we have, that I had about those things. So after college, I actually signed up to be a volunteer with the Diocese of Charleston. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Met Deacon Jerry. Then for about a year, I received some formation. One of the things I read then was a book called, I guess it's not an encyclical, but a letter from St. John Paul called Christi Fidelis Laici, on Christ's faithful people. And the letter talks about the role of the laity. And it's probably the reading that convinced me that I shouldn't be a priest. I know that sounds weird. I would have been a terrible priest. Peter actually probably knows this, and Aaron better than anybody. I would have been pious and pompous and terrible. Y'all would have hated me if I were. But I recognize in that writing, it talks about that our call to holiness, right? It's not you can be a priest and you should try to be holy. Be a nun, try to be holy. But ours is the same, right? It's the same call from Jesus to do his will in every moment and to live that. And that gave me, I think, a lot of confidence that I could be really Catholic and just be a dad, be something else. I don't know, I was going to be a lawyer then either. So I had this kind of moment of discernment, and that's kind of how I arrived at, I don't think I'm going to be a priest. And I was sitting on the beach here in Charleston with a friend of mine. He was like, oh, did you ever think about being an attorney? And I was like, no. So again, being the nerd that I am, I went and read a bunch of cases, like Casey v. Planned Parenthood, and Lawrence v. Texas, hot button topics on abortion or on, gay marriage. And, I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. So I applied for law school. I went to work for an attorney, Peter, to figure out if that's really what I wanted to do. He couldn't talk me out of it. He tried. And ended up going to Notre Dame Law School. I got on campus for a visit, and I was like, I'm going here if I get in. And I did. And obviously, it's the biggest blessing in my life to go there because I met Aaron. At Corby's Irish Pub, which is, if you've seen Rudy, it's we're there in the pub talking, and that's where we met. Aaron had a picture in her hand. One of the books that I read before law school that I think also informed kind of my perspective on how I needed to live my life was the book by Pierre de Caussade. I think he's like a 17th or 18th century Jesuit, maybe even a little later. And it's called On Abandonment to Divine Providence. And it's, it's like a 90-page book. And it really is, if you could just think about abandoning yourself to divine providence, it could just be that written for 90 pages. But it's a beautiful reflection on that, but I think it's been instrumental in just instructing me on, this life that we are given, like it's not about us. It's not just my life, right? It's a life given to me that I've received. And the least I can do is sort of like try to figure out what God wants me to do with it. And I think that to me that sort of get this life as a gift, everything is a gift from God, is something our world needs to hear. Again, our world is very focused on you should do what's best for you, you should live your best life, you should do whatever makes you happy. I got that instruction, right, from people I love and care for. You should do whatever makes you happy. And that's a lie. Like, you shouldn't do whatever makes you happy. We shouldn't teach our kids that. We should teach our kids, you should do what God wants you to do in your life, for other people. One of the things, again, kind of getting back to radical openness, is if you look at the lives of the saints, right? The amount of diversity of the way that you can live a holy life, it's literally unfathomable. Like, you can think about, right, St. Martin de Porres. He was in Peru. He served slaves. He was a barber. Like, then you can, obviously there's St. Francis, who was rich beyond all measure of his time and gave it all up and just kind of hobbled around in the dirt for a couple years and preached about Jesus. St. Elizabeth of Hungary was a queen, right? So I think the lives of the saints give us, and have given me, this kind of perspective of what does a holy life look like? What does God's will look like for me? And the amazing and kind of scary thing is, like, there's not a playbook, right, for each of us. There's not here's the way that you have to be holy. Like, you have to say the rosary every day, or you have to serve the poor, or you have to be dedicated to life, right? And that you have to fight these battles or this certain battle. Your role might be very unique and different than other people's roles. And one of the things I hope that we can start to recognize is there's a lot of roles for us to fill in the world. And I think that openness, like, has proven very kind of fruitful for me in a few ways. I want to talk about those. One is openness to life. We have 6 kids, and if you want to cause consternation, concern, or question in a modern person, tell them you have 6 kids. I mean, we didn't really start noticing until you have like 3, 4, right? It's like you've got your hands full, thanks. But you have 6, it's kind of like, what's going on with you? What's wrong? You're a little different. Another way, but obviously, like, having a lot of kids, it's the best blessing we've ever gotten. And it's the most humbling thing that I've done, at least, because it just shows me my inadequacy and my weaknesses, like, every single day, numerous times. So it's good for me in that. But the blessing that comes from that, right, is you can't calculate it. These are souls that you've been entrusted with, that you get to raise and try to help them figure out what God wants them to do in their lives. And it's terrifying and amazing that we get this opportunity to join in that. Another way that I think we found great joy as a family is through homeschooling. And I say that as somebody who went through Catholic school, never intended, neither of us, to homeschool our children. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Maybe Aaron can talk about it someday.
Why not to do it?
But why we did it. But if you really want to kind of twist a modern person's brain, tell them you have 6 kids and you homeschool them all. Like, it's just inconceivable. And what I'm kind of getting at that is this radical openness that I'm talking about, that I'm encouraging you to reflect on and think about. It's not just being open to what God's will is in your life. It's not just being open to like new people in your business or your clients or your coworkers, but it's being open to sharing your life with them, right? To not putting your faith under a bushel basket, but to say, I'm Catholic, right? Why do you have 6 kids? I'm Catholic. Why do you homeschool? Well, that's complicated, but a large part of it is I'm Catholic. And at least in sort of the world that I operate in as an attorney, there are a lot of Catholics in Charleston, which is a blessing. But there's a lot of non-Catholics, and there's a lot of sort of, I'll just say, modern man, modern woman in the legal profession. And they're sort of dogged materialists. I mean, they think about what's going to get me to be successful? What's the next step for my success? What's the next thing that will make me happy? And I think they need to hear from us. They need to hear different perspectives of how to live a good life, how to live a different life, how to have joy. And if we're not open to talking about that and to sharing that with them, they won't hear it, right? They'll just keep hearing their, scroll that tells them, you need to wear this makeup, or you need to buy this bathing suit, or you need to look this way, or you need to go on this trip, or whatever. But that doesn't bring lasting joy. It just brings temporary kind of relief from the, existential problem of modern man. So I encourage, and I hope that you'll sort of reflect on that as we're sort of in business, right? And in the business world, there's a lot of hurt people in the business world who never really heard the gospel. And so I think we have unique opportunities in the business world to stand up and just, I'm Catholic. Why aren't you going to be there Friday? Well, it's Good Friday and I take off on Good Friday. What's Good Friday? Well, you tell them what Good Friday is. I have a former coworker of mine who was very, the level of his ignorance on religion is staggering. And this is a smart person. And he thought, he didn't know that Jews celebrated, he thought Jews celebrated Christmas. Didn't understand sort of the difference. And through no fault of his own, not a mean person, a lovely person, but just had no experience of it. And, one of the things he said to me is, you're the first person I've known that's smart that believes in God. And that's terrifying to me. And it should be terrifying to a lot of us because, the people that are in power or in positions of responsibility, those are the ones that really, really need the gospel a lot more, right? To be guiding our institutions. So it's scary. I'm glad that he's my friend and we talk and we can have real, honest conversations about everything. He hasn't converted. I hope he will someday. I don't know if he will, but at least he's met somebody who is somewhat intelligent and believes in God. So I think that, again, this idea of radical openness, it needs to extend to people that are not, what we all obviously think of serving, or of talking about, right? We need to be talking about our faith with people just outside of this room, at our churches, and in our Catholic groups. We need to be sharing the gospel every day with people around us, or at least tell the reason why we do things. Because it's a world that's not ready, that hasn't heard it. Like, I'm just shocked, and maybe some of this is generational, but I grew up without much of an education other than like literally answering questions in sort of apologetic fashion, figuring it out. We need to be thinking, I think, very strategically, but intelligently and creatively, and being open to new ways to educate our kids, to educate ourselves, to educate our people that are our leaders that we work with about Catholicism, and about why we live the way we do and make the choices we do. So I would encourage you to my sort of plea is think about that. Think about how God's calling you, maybe in a unique way that He puts on your heart to do something that is not an established thing, right? There's not, you sign up for something at the parish. Maybe it's something that you start at your parish. And I want to encourage us to really think through how we can continue to be radically open to God's will in our lives, but also to serving others. And for me, I'll tell you, like, some of this is an experience that I had. Like, the first time I really believed in God was I was on a hike. It was a 50-degree day. The wind was blowing through the trees. I was kind of alone. And I was just overcome and overwhelmed with beauty, right? The beauty of that moment. And what I think is a challenge for us, especially now with the internet and with the way that I think business is sort of going, is how do we capture those moments of beauty? How do we keep having those moments of beauty when we're not outside? I think that we need to try to encourage people to recognize that beauty is not just, right, God's creation in nature, but it's in the soul in front of us. And having that abiding sort of sense of God's presence, God's creation for the person in front of us is really hard to do. It's really hard to do when your 3-year-old like whines at you 4 hours a day. It's really hard to do when you've asked the person at your job, right, to do this thing and they just can't do it, or they haven't done it, or they're lazy. It's really hard to do when you're standing next to someone in court who has assaulted someone or murdered someone, which I've done. I've been next to court, in court, trying to represent people who've done terrible things. And it's hard to sort of maintain that this is a gift of God, this person. Doesn't matter what they've done, they're a gift of God. And that's, I think, a part of sort of this radical openness that I'm encouraging you to think about. I want to end with something that I think captures a little bit of this awe that I have of God's creation, but also I include people in that, right? Like, people are God's creation too, His best creation. Some of y'all, I'm sure, have heard this. I know Father Allen has. This is Gerard Manley Hopkins. The world is charged with the glory of God. It will flame out like shining from shook foil. It gathers greatness like the ooze of oil crushed. Why do men then not wreck His rod? Generations have trod, and all is seared with trade, bleared, smeared with toil. And wears man's smudge, and shares men's smell the soil. It's bare now, nor can foot feel. Being shod, and for all this, nature is never spent. There lives the dearest freshness, deep down things. And though the last lights off the black west went, oh, morning, that the brown brick eastward springs, because the Holy Ghost over the bent world broods with warm breast and with bright wings. God's creation is always around us. It's beautiful, it's amazing. And we need to see that in the people around us too. We need to see it in our businesses. We need to see it in our service to the poor. We need to see it in the recognition of each individual and beautiful soul. There's my reflection.
Beautiful, Cody. Thank you so much. That is just really wonderful. Any questions from here?
Cody, if you consider yourself not pious, then 90% of the people in this room are
Not pious.
That's a fact. You are.
Cody, where did you have your very first legal job before you went to law school?
Very first with him.
Yeah.
I said that already.
And you too.
If you
Me
had
too.
to recommend
Yep.
like a book for that very smart learner man that chose to marry a Catholic, is on his fourth child, but is in raising, like what book would, I mean, he's like nuclear, chemical, what book, I was like Pascal's pensies, like what book would you give to that man?
Like a scientist? Like a scientismist?
Just.
I would ask Tom right next to you. That's what I would.
It may be his very smart
I
10-year-old daughter that might
Yeah,
challenge
so.
him, like you're telling me to go to receive communion, yet,
Yeah,
it may come
yeah.
from the children, but.
Yeah, I don't know. And again, I come from sort of my experience and my perspective of like beauty is it's you can't. How can you look at the world? And I've heard Deacon Paul Rosenblum talk about this. He was a biologist. How can you look at the world and see the order of it, the gorgeousness of it, and think that it's just nothing? Like it's literally nothing. Like I cannot fathom that. And it's probably a weakness that I've been talking to people like that. Like I don't get you you're scientific materialists, because you can't look at a leaf and think like it's order and structure and that it works. I mean, I think about these guys who, artists, right? Like they just got back from space. The fact that we can like get out of Earth's gravity for days, fly around the moon, and come back and live to tell the tale, like, how do you explain that? That's not, like, man's ability to reason and to solve problems, it's not perfect, but it's really amazing. And it's mysterious. Like, there's no explanation from science for that we have an ordered universe that makes sense. So I don't know, that's not a great answer to your question, but maybe Tom.
I'll give one
Yeah.
recommendation, modern recommendation. If you someone you know, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's in science or he's in. Anyway,
Yeah.
what I would say is you read the short biography of Jerome Lejeune from France, who discovered the trisomy 21 genetic anomaly that causes Down syndrome. And his daughter wrote it's a short biography, and he was actually named before he died, he had cancer, to St. John Paul II's first pontifical council on life, and he fought against the French, intellectuals who thought that they should just be, aborted. Okay, so it's a testimony to life, okay, and the beauty of all creatures, something like that. So.
Yeah, it's related to Vegas, self-abandonment, to divine providence, and is that still part of your?
Yeah, I haven't read it in a while. I read it every once in a while. How did I get it? I don't even remember who recommended it to me, to be honest. Just somebody recommended it. I got it with the Daughters of St. Paul when they were here. God bless them. I wish they were still here. But yeah, I wish I did. I've given it away. I don't even have a copy right now because I gave it to somebody. We lost it. Yeah, Bill.
I used to live in Henderson in the 80s. Henderson Memorial Hospital was a big town of ours. And we went down there all the time. We always had to stop at the Amish restaurant. And they had Best Buy around. Well, very made. I don't know if that's very much good there, yeah. But this was in the early 80s.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe you weren't even born then.
I was too young. I was 79. Child of the 70s.
But I'll tell you what, they served Best Buy.
I have one question, if I could, forgive me for jumping in. Radical openness. As an attorney, you are trained to be someone in control.
A hired gun.
Yeah, but you're also trained to just totally be in control of a situation. How do you strike that balance? Because radical openness, bumps up against both pride, but then humility and letting go. Where do you strike that balance in encountering the souls you meet?
I know. I know because I've worked with him, so can I answer?
Sure.
Based on my experience, because I assisted Cody many times. I'm an interpreter for the judiciary, and many times, and I think it was probably during the first term of this regime that we were in the jail all the time because of the what do they call it, the
Illegal reentry.
Illegal reentry, thank you. And we were there very often, and of course it's kind of the cases that are cookie cutters, like, okay, so you did this according to the guidelines, look at this column here, and this is what you're gonna get. It's pretty much standard. However, Cody, and this when you were talking about seeing God's creation in everyone, you literally, that's exactly what you did, because you did not treat, first of all, you were never, ever judgmental, like, oh, you're illegal, why did you come here? Why did you cross the border without the proper papers and blah, 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 blah. No, you were always so nice, so kind to ask them about their background. What made them come here? When they told you that they had families, that they had children born here, you always went the extra step to just make sure that their family was taken care of, if they had access to their family's communications. And of course, I noticed it because I was there interpreting for you all of that, and many times I was like, he's so compassionate, oh my goodness. I've worked with tons and tons of attorneys throughout my professional life, and I've seen everything. And Cody was always right here in terms of being compassionate and being non-judgmental and always seeing the person who was incarcerated because he came here to this country to work. That was pretty much it back then during that time. Never there was a discussion about God and you pray and I'm gonna pray for you. No, nothing. It was very professional. However, you could see the compassion, the empathy, the care, the way of treating someone, even if they were illegal, even they have done bad things, even if they were behind a glass in Charleston County. Even then, you would see Cody treating them as a real child of God. So that's my testimony because I work with
I will say, Frank, I do think it is a hard job. We've got other attorneys here, to not get swept up in sort of the glory, right, of winning a case or whatever. I would call it fortune. Like, I served as a public defender, so I lost almost every case. It's like you're not there for the glory. And so I don't know. I mean, maybe that humbled me a lot because I did it for 18 years. And I don't know. Maybe it's a bit of a gift that God's given me to have that level of empathy and frankly to not be able to, or to be able to segregate it a little bit. Like, I can come home and like, you she doesn't know what I did that day. It was really terrible, like that I had to deal with. So I can't like take credit for it, to some extent. I think I've always been able to, sort of just see that gift. This is a person, and what does it matter? Like, it's not me that put me here and them there, right? Like I made choices to allow myself to flourish, but I very well could have been born in Guatemala. So again, to me, it's going back to a recognition of like it's sort of all grace. It's all a gift. Like I can stand up and talk to people. That's a gift. I do things to practice that, but it's not like something that I just can do that. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, sure.
I think what you've defined is, God's in control, and what really being in control is about is that kind of love and compassion for your fellow man. I think, in terms of the competition between that's really the love is what is paradoxically.
Yeah, and I think like the funny thing,
feeding into God's control.
Yeah, the funny thing is like, the hardest people to not get mad at, like in a criminal case, it's like the judge, the prosecutor, like those are the ones it's actually harder because you're kind
to
of
be
against
nice
them,
to,
right? You're against them, or they're against you, or the judge is making what you think's a mistake or whatever. But I really, and I talked to some 6th graders last week about the Kill Mockingbird, and 8th graders, and right, like at this bench, like everybody wants to be at this bench. It's like, how do you defend somebody, right, that did something wrong that you think is morally objectionable? It's like everybody thinks about the bad stuff, right? But it's like stealing's really bad too. Like, nobody's like, oh, you represent a somebody who stole something. It's like, no, they think about the worst stuff. But I think that, I love that we have like a justice system that's established so that we can, that's how we sort of fight it out. And instead of like fighting it out, right? And that this, like our justice system, it's incredibly moral. Like a lot of, again, I think modern people think, oh, the law is not morality. It's like, no, the entire law is morality. The whole thing is morality. And so I just think that to be able to participate in that as an attorney is something that I really cherish. Like to try to achieve justice in this very small modicum of a way is really a privilege and a treasure to be a part of.
Well, and Cody, it's a blessing to have you in our community, doing all that you do. So thank you so very, very much.